Good day, everyone. On behalf of the International Pollutants Elimination Network and our co-sponsors, Eco Accord Russia, Toxics Free Core China, and Nexus 3 Foundation Indonesia, we warmly welcome you to this global webinar, How Plastics Poison the Circular Economy, Data from China, Indonesia, Russia, and other countries reveal plastics public health threats. We would like to acknowledge the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency for providing the funding for this very important global reports. I'm Leah Esquilio of IPEN, your facilitator for this webinar. Before we proceed, please allow me to share these reminders. This webinar is being recorded and the recording will be made public on IPEN's YouTube channel, so please watch out for it. Language interpretations for Arabic, Bahasa Indonesia, Chinese, French, Russian, and Spanish are available. You may click on the interpretation button down below to pick the language of your choice. There will be short Q&A sessions at the end of each set of presentations, but you may type your question at any time using the Q&A button also below. Lastly, we would like to invite you all to complete the post-webinar survey we will be posting later. IPEN has recently published new reports revealing that countries seeking to implement safe plastic circular economies face significant obstacles in handling large volumes of diverse plastic waste streams. As a result, known toxic chemicals are blindly allowed into plastic products and expose vulnerable populations, including children and women. These series of reports also reveal that toxic chemicals that have been banned in other regions or under international chemical conventions continue to be used or recycled from old waste into new consumer products, resulting in risks that are impossible to quantify and further fueling the supply of non-circular hazardous plastic waste globally. These reports that we will be presenting are also especially significant considering the recent UNEA 5 resolution that would lead to negotiating a new binding agreement on plastic pollution. Joining us today are the experts behind these globally important reports, and we're grateful that they're sharing their expertise and time with all of us today. To introduce the context and rationale of the studies conducted, I warmly welcome Jitka Strakova as our first speaker. Jitka is a global researcher at IPEN, and for the last 15 years has worked as a volunteer, a local campaigner, and later as a coordinator of international projects and as a research advisor in Arnica, a ZEC-based NGO. Jitka authored several studies on POPs chemicals in products and co-authored monitoring reports on POPs pollution hotspots around the globe. Let's welcome Jitka. The floor is now yours, Jitka.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, dear colleagues, dear friends. I am pleased to present you results of our recent studies on the presence of plastic additives used worldwide, but our studies look deeply into the problem of plastic additives used in consumer products, mainly in 3 countries, including Indonesia, Russia, and China. Day by day, there is more and more evidence about the undeniable harms caused by plastic materials. Those harms relate not only to plastic pollution itself, but also to the adverse health effects of plastic additives, which are being released during plastic manufacture, use of plastic products, and their final disposal. Recent series of IPEN studies are filling some of the information gaps and are adding concerns, evidence, and arguments for urgent solutions to the circulation of toxic additives in plastic materials, waste, and the environment. Great. So yeah, on this larger, hopefully well-seen slide, I want to illustrate that IPEN has been working on the issue of toxic additives in plastics in many years. And we don't look only into one separated stage of the plastic life cycle, but we are continuously bringing evidence about releases of toxic additives in every stage of the plastic life cycle, starting with the production of plastics, continuing with circulation of plastic additives through plastic pellets into new recycled products, but also we look also into the harms caused by plastic waste in developing countries where plastic waste is very often being exported. In some of our surveys, we also illustrated that recycled products are coming back to our market as a boomerang, bringing the toxic chemicals that once entrance the materials and continue to circulate. As a result of this practice, recycling of toxic chemicals in plastic, we are receiving chemicals which are being legacy chemicals for many years, which are being banned, but they continue to circulate and be present in products, including children toys. Recently, IPEN, together with several participating organizations, launched 3 surveys into plastic additives in consumer products. We investigated presence of per and polyfluorinated substances known as PFAS or forever chemicals in outdoor wear. In this type of outdoor clothes or wear, PFAS are being used as chemicals, as surfactants, making the products water and grease resistant. In our second survey, we investigated presence of brominated flame retardants in toys. And in our third report, we looked at very distinctive groups of chemicals specific in certain plastic materials, but there are many common features for all those 3 groups of chemicals. They are all endocrine disrupting chemicals. And our children and mainly women in productive age are very sensitive and vulnerable to the adverse effect of endocrine disrupting chemicals. Those chemicals have potencies to interfere with our hormonal systems and can cause birth defects and other developmental disorders. When we look a bit more deeply into the problem of PFAS use in outdoor wear and clothing, it's important to say that PFAS, those forever chemicals, are omnipresent in our environment and in our bodies. They are found far from the place of their origin. They are found in Arctic. Once when they enter the environment, they continue to circulate forever. Unfortunately, it's our drinking water and diet and food the main exposure routes to PFAS. PFAS are related to thyroid disease, increase of blood cholesterol levels, and many other problems, including decreased effects, impacts of our vaccination, which is very alarming, taking into account the need of anti-COVID vaccinations these days. On this picture, I just wanted to demonstrate the wide use of PFAS. They are not only used in our outdoor clothing, but also in cosmetics, food wrapping, Teflon pans, and firefighting foams, and much more. And once they produced and used in the products, they can be released mainly through water streams, but also via thermal contact and releases into house dust. What's clear, once when released, they continue to circulate, and very unfortunately, we currently do not own or handle technologies that are able to distract PFAS in our drinking water sources. It's why there are many scandals nowadays showing wide contamination of our drinking water sources close to PFAS pollution hotspots. With this, I will switch to the second group of chemicals surveyed in our research, and these are brominated flame retardants, chemicals used to reduce fire-related injuries. And again, those chemicals are mainly persistent organic pollutants, very hard to be decomposed in the environment under the natural conditions. And similar to PFAS, these chemicals are a large group of congeners of chemicals having endocrine disrupting properties. Very unfortunate habit or inadequate practice of our legal action is that one representative or several representative of large group of chemicals is being banned or restricted at one moment, but there are much more waiting the queue to replace the formerly restricted ones, and this way those regrettable substitutes are finding the way into the products. And it's the case of PFAS as well as brominated flame retardants. With brominated flame retardants, we also observe the effect of toxic recycling. Brominated flame retardants, originally used in plastic casings of electronics, are being recycled into new products, including children toys, as our former and today research shows. Again, humans are exposed to brominated flame retardants through thermal exposure, dust ingestion, and through human diet. And my last slide for now, it's about introducing last survey, which is being presented to you today, and it's survey on bisphenol A in baby feeding bottles and other water bottles and items designed for young children and being in contact with food. What's very concerning about BPA, that 90% of world population have been found to have BPA in their bodies. And again, children are in particularly sensitive to BPA effects, which include different sexual hormonal dysfunctions. Primary source of BPA exposures is the diet, while air, dust, and water are other potential sources of BPA exposures. Unfortunately, there is no legal action, global legal action on BPA. There are quite many countries having BPA restricted, either in baby feeding bottles or in food contact materials or in toys, but there are still many waiting for having BPA restricted. And we hope that our survey will contribute to the urgent action for restricting BPA in children products. And with this, I will be giving floor to our next presenters, Olga, Theo, and Lingi, who will present the data from their countries.
Thank you, Yitka, for sharing the significance of the studies, the 3 technical reports that are included in the project, particularly the problems with plastic toxic additives that you mentioned that was covered, PFAS, brominated flame retardants, and bisphenol A. Now, to present the country situation and results of these studies from the key countries included in the report, I would like to call on 3 experts from Indonesia, China, and Russia. First, from Indonesia is Tio Septiono. Tio is the Toxic and Zero Waste Program Officer of Nexus 3 Foundation. He is an environmental engineer, chemist, and systems analyst by training. He has focused on environmental chemistry as well as chemicals and waste issues for Nexus 3 Foundation since 2016. And he is currently working on transparent pollution in Indonesia, among other projects. Friends, let's listen to Tio.
Okay, so I'm just going to focus on the context within the Indonesian part of the result of the sets of report that IPEN is releasing. So there are samples taken specifically from Indonesia, which later we check BFR chemical groups, and then as well as BPA and PFAS. And then there are multiple product types that are being sampled along with the different sample sizes, as you can see in the screen. So for instance, I'm going to start with the brominated flame retardant. 1 second, I'm going to leave this here. So yeah, this is basically the distribution of the result shown from Indonesian samples only. As you can see, as Jitka also already explained, there are several use of deca, octa, and penta BDE, and these are considered EDCs or endocrine disrupting chemicals, which are mainly used on electronic plastics and then ABS, among others. And then also HBCD, which is persistent in the environment, which you can also see the use on the screen. But among all the samples that are being sampled, we can see the octa BDE ranges quite broadly. And then we can also find the deca and then the sum of PBDE among these samples. But only only 3 of the samples that contains the penta BDE that we found during the sampling for this report, but over 60% samples contain HBCD among these samples. And then there's also for the brominated flame retardant, we're looking at the TBBPA and novel BFRs. As Jitka also already explained, and you can also see there are multiple concerns of these chemicals being toxic to the environment, it's persistent in the environment, and being an endocrine disruptor. More than 90% of these samples actually contain TBBPA. And then all samples do contains the novel BFR compound of all the samples that we took. And then there are also, looking at the regulations context in Indonesia, we only have the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. I'm sorry, this is the government regulation number 22 of last year, which mainly concern about environmental protection and management. And this is from the context of waste, not really products. So if we're looking at products, there is no regulations that address this directly. But if there are waste coming from polymer production that contains flame retardant, and then brominated organic compound is also explicitly mentioned in that regulation, but not really on the product side. Now we're moving on to the second chemicals in the sets of report, which is BPA. These samples, 80% of them contains BPA. And then we have to look at the products that also put BPA-free labels on them. So 4 of 6 that says BPA-free actually exceeds the Indonesian FDA standard, which is 0.6 ppm. And then the non-labeled ones, 7 of 9 of them, also exceeding that standard as well. This is the regulation I mentioned earlier. So we do have a standard concentration for food packaging, specifically about BPA, which is 0.6 ppm. And then quick side story. Currently, there's a dynamic recently, late last year up until earlier this year as well, where basically 2 types of industries, which is refillable and single-use water gallons for drinking water, they get into a heated debate online in the internet over different media outlets discussing about mandatory BPA cautionary label from that has to be put mandatorily on the products. But that is looked at one side of the industry as it's going to be looked at as a black market. And then also there's another side of the industry saying, basically, if we're using different types of plastic, there's also another risks of phthalate. So it's going to be interesting for us looking at Indonesia's dynamics, how we look into this, because it also involves another types of persistent organic pollutants in it. But moving on, the third one is PFAS. From this report, we only took, there's only 5 samples taken from Indonesia, and then only 1 of 5 samples was detecting containing FTOH of 12:2 ratio, but all samples contains the 8:2 ratio. And then one of the samples contained DIPAP among different congener. And these are taken from different apparels, including the highest being the hijab, but this is only 1 sample, and this seems to be geographical as well. But then we also, 2 years ago, in April 2019, we take the samples from different textile products, as well as paper and food packaging, as well as rubber crumbs. And we detected over 80% overall of these samples containing PFAS. And then looking at the regulatory context, there are multiple regulations addressing this, including the Ministry of Agriculture, prohibition of using PFAS ingredient or additives in pesticides from the industry, that they have to verify PFAS content information. From the Ministry of Trade, there's a standard that is standard concentration of maximum PFAS and PFOA in textiles, especially for those who are trying to export their products. And then there's also standardized testing protocols by our national standardization agency. But there's not, until now at least, there's no national agency or even cooperation with international organization that has been or conducted to monitor PFAS or PFAS in general in human on the environment or in products, because we lack of lab capacity, which is the first point of our recommendation. We have to nationally increase the lab capacity across the country, either it's government research facilities, universities, or private services. There should also be strong evaluation mechanism for product labeling, especially for those who claims to be BPA free or PFOA or PFAS free. And then the third one is to conduct monitoring either in the environment or biomarkers of POPs. But in this case, especially BFRs, BPA, and PFAS. And the fourth one is to remove or do not use toxic and environmentally persistent additives and resins in the production process of plastic, because it will undermine the economy itself. And the fourth one is transparency or consumer disclosure of chemical use to consumers in products, especially hazardous and toxic chemicals. And then the last one is, because we have currently being discussed chemical management draft legislation, which is currently enlisted in the National Legislation Priority Program, which Indonesian NGOs and the public should look into that further if we want to regulate chemical more integratively across the country. Thank you. That's from my end. Over to you, Leah.
Thank you for sharing the Indonesian context, Tio. Sorry to hear some very alarming results from the studies you made. Some questions are already coming in the Q&A box, so thank you for those. Our panelists, feel free to answer. Our speakers, you can start answering the questions already, but we will also cover some during the Q&A. So our next speaker is Olga Sterenskaya, who will present the country data from Russia. Olga is a senior advisor to EcoAccord Russia. EcoAccord is the IPEN hub for the EECCA region. Olga is also the co-director of Health and Environment Justice Support. She received the 2009 Goldman Prize Award and the 2011 UNEP Earth Champion Award for grassroots environmental activism in Eastern Europe, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. The floor is now yours, Olga.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Leah. So I will try to share my screen then. Yeah. So I was asked to present the results of this collaborative research from Russia. And I may say that...
Olga,
okay.
I'm sorry. Please put it in here.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, oops. Yeah. So this is a collaborative research from 3 countries, and you already heard the case from Indonesia, which was very detailed. So I would like to briefly start saying that the share in the global production of plastic that Russia has is not very high, and it amounts to about 3%. And the most important import-dependent markets are linear polyethylene, PVC, and ABS plastic. So, as many other countries, the system of plastic waste management in Russia includes waste collection, recycling, landfilling, and waste incineration. And here on this slide, you see the approximate structure of household plastic waste. And as it is shown on this slide, so the household plastic waste is mainly consists of packaging and packaging film, as well as plastic bottles. So regarding this collaborative research, as it was already mentioned in the case of Indonesia, so brominated flame retardants, as well as PFAS chemicals and BPA were tested in 3 types of products, and the examples are here. So BFRs were tested in plastic, variety of plastic products, including toys, and PFAS were tested in Russia. They were tested in winter gloves, and BPA were tested in water containers and in baby bottles. Oops. Yeah, so some highlights findings on BFRs. So as I should say, they are very similar to those from Indonesia. So there were 30 samples analyzed for BFRs, and all these samples contained brominated flame retardants like penta, octa, deca, BDEs, and HBCD, already banned by the Stockholm Convention. And the right composition and concentrations of these chemicals in the tested samples suggest that plastic electronic waste was used to produce the recycled plastic materials, and they were likely used to make these products. And I should say that this is actually very true, because from our experience of having similar investigations, for example, in Kyrgyzstan, I should say that when plastic waste is recycled, usually recyclers do not distinguish between contaminated plastic and less contaminated plastic, and everything goes into plastic pellets. And this is very true to all countries of Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia. And actually, IPEN, other report analyzing toxic chemicals in plastic pellets, also just shows how contaminated the recycled plastic might be. Regarding the national BFRs regulations in Russia, Russia is a party to the Stockholm Convention starting 2011, but Russia also declares that any amendment to annexes of the Stockholm Convention shall enter into force for the country only upon the deposit of its instrument of ratification, acceptance, approval, or accession with respect to each amendment. And unfortunately, Russia has not ratified any amendments on BFRs yet. And in addition, Russia does not have legislation banning the use of all POX BFRs. And at the same time, it produces and receives e-waste containing these substances. So, oops, I'm sorry. Yeah. So in this report, recommendations were developed, and they include the recommendations which are also included into IPEN overall report for 3 countries studied. But in addition to this, the recommendations also are focused on officials, producers, and stakeholders in Russia. And for example, for officials, the recommendations include the request to urgently ratify the amendments on BDEs to the Stockholm Convention and establish a legal requirement to disclose information on the presence of these chemicals in products, including products made from recycled raw materials. And what is interesting, ensure compliance with the technical regulation of the Eurasian Economic Commission on the safety of toys. And this technical regulation actually prohibits the manufacture of toys from recycled materials derived from waste recycling. But as we saw in this study, unfortunately, this technical regulation is not properly enforced, and we still find toys made out of recycled plastic on the market in the country. A few highlights about findings on PFAS in products in Russia. So I will not repeat again how dangerous PFAS and BFRs are, because all of them are actually EDCs and have enormous numbers of negative health consequences. And I would like to say that all analyzed samples of products purchased in Russia contained PFAS. And 6 out of 10 samples contained 8.2 FTOH, and the highest concentration was detected in winter gloves, which is 1.790 nanogram per gram. And I should say that this PFAS that was tested, that was revealed in winter gloves, it is known to release PFOA when transformed in the environment. And as it was already mentioned here, PFOA is banned under the Stockholm Convention. So outside the provisions of the Stockholm Convention, Russia has not adopted any additional regulatory control over PFAS. But in addition to this, Russia has not ratified the Stockholm Convention amendments on PFOA or PFAS yet. And similar to Indonesia, by the time of this study, no national agencies in Russia have any program for environmental monitoring of PFAS and PFOA, or human biomonitoring or monitoring of these chemicals in products. And to add to this, the content of PFAS chemicals in household products is not regulated in the country. So again, the recommendations from this study includes, these recommendations includes those from IPEN report, but in addition to those recommendations, we urgently we request the country to ratify the amendments to PFOA and PFAS under the Stockholm Convention, and support the inclusion of new PFAS chemicals for global elimination without exemptions. And we suggest that the country also contribute to list all PFAS chemicals for global elimination under the Stockholm Convention. And in addition to this, we believe that it is very important to establish legal requirements for mandatory labeling of products containing PFAS, and give preference in public procurement to products that do not contain these chemicals. So we also believe that it is very important to conduct regular monitoring of PFAS chemicals in products, in consumer products, and as well as in drinking water and fish and soil, and conduct biomonitoring of PFAS chemicals in people, especially the most vulnerable populations and people living close to sources of PFAS contamination. So, and the last finding within this report highlights BPA content in products in the country. And so 15 products were tested and 86% contained BPA. And 80% of baby bottles also contained BPA. And so I should say that in Russia, the use of BPA in baby bottles is unregulated. And while conducting this research, we had to compare the results with the EU limits of BPA in baby bottles, because there is no similar regulations in Russia. So having said that, we also developed recommendations, again, for officials and for industry and for consumers. And I'm happy to discuss the recommendations with everyone interested in more details, but noting that we do not have time. So here I listed recommendations that are targeting the officials. Like we believe it is important to establish a maximum allowable dose of BPA released from containers and prioritize baby bottles and food containers. And also we believe it is important to establish a maximum allowable level of bisphenol in food products. And we had a similar project a couple of years ago testing canned food in Russia on BPA. And given that Russia is not only an importer of products, but also a major producer of both BPA and polycarbonate plastic, it is very important to establish this maximum allowable level of BPA in food products. We believe that it is important to prohibit the use not only of bisphenol A in food and beverage packaging, but also other bisphenols like bisphenol F and S. And it is crucial to establish a legal requirement to disclose the presence of bisphenols in food and beverage containers. And as we heard already, they are often mislabeling information. Misleading information on the presence of BPA in, for example, food containers, when information is said BPA free, but in fact, when tests started, they reveal not only BPA, bisphenol A, but also other bisphenols. So so thank you very much, and I will be happy to answer questions if any. Thank you.
Thank you for your eye-opening presentation, Olga. Seems to be a lot of policy gaps, no, in Russia, and certainly some very alarming results that you shared there on the tests you conducted. Finally, to present the country data from China, I would like to call next He Lingwei. Lingwei is the Senior Project Director and Researcher at the Toxics Free Corps. Her focus is on chemical management policies and the environmental impact of incineration and marine pollution. In terms of chemicals, she works on persistent organic pollutants, particularly dioxins and heavy metals like mercury. Take it away, Lingwei.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is He Linghui. I'm from Toxics Free Corp, China. I would like to thank IPEN for organizing this webinar. Being part of the cooperation is fun. We have learned a lot, which would help the upcoming campaigns we are going to conduct. So in 1929, China produced almost 96 million tons of plastic, which amounts for 1/3 of global production. 70% of them are for PE, PP, PVC, PS, and ABS. So in 2019, China generated 63 million tons of plastic waste in total, of which the buried, incinerated, and the recycled ones each accounted for about 30%, with the remaining 7% leaking into the environment. The recycling volume of plastic waste reached 18.9 million tons in 2019, which is about twice the recycling volume of plastics in the EU and 7 times that in the United States. Among the various types of plastic waste in 2019, the largest recycling volume was waste PET, reaching 6.3 million tons, including 4.2 million tons of waste PET bottles and 2.1 million tons of other waste PET. The second largest is 3.4 million tons of packaging film plastic waste, and the third is 1.5 million tons of electronic and electrical plastic waste. In order to resolve the plastic pollution issue, China has released and implemented a series of policies and regulations in recent years. The most recent ones, I assume you are quite familiar with the waste import ban released in 2017, which has decreased the amount of waste imported dramatically. In 2019, there is basically zero waste imported from overseas. So the most recent ones are presented by the Directive on Further Strengthening Plastic Pollution Management, officially released in 2020. This directive marks a new stage of more stringent plastic pollution management across China and will be followed by supportive specific policies and programs. This directive, for the first time, also proposed that chemical additives that are harmful to the human body and the environment shall not be added into plastic in violation of regulations. here you could find the national standards and requirements for plastic products. Actually, so those are basically most of them GB with GB starts means it's mandatory, but actually among all those standards, there is only BPA is not allowed, is banned in baby used water bottles, but there is no ban for other chemicals in other plastic products. Only some recommended national standards has contained those chemicals in plastics. So in order to also, here is a list of, this spreadsheet shows you the regulations of chemical management. Actually, it is from the it's from the perspective of environmental protection, not chemicals in products. So there I listed PFOS. The first line is PFOS, its salts, and PFOS F, and the second, third, and fourth, fifth are brominated from flame retardants, and the seventh one is PFOA. BPA is not in any of these lists, not the catalogs. So so far, the BDE 209 and PFOA has not yet to take effect in China. It's still ineffective. And but actually recently China has last year, the end of last year, China has issued a catalog of key emerging pollutants under control draft for comment. P4A and BDE 209 are in that catalog. And here you can see that also PFOS and PFOA are in the catalog of products prohibited from import and export. You see that? No, they are not there. But I mean, hex BDE and no, there's 4 types of BDEs are in the catalog of products prohibited from import and export. And some of them, like P4A, PFOS, are in the catalog of toxic chemicals prioritized for control. And there is one and only PFOS and HBCD are in the catalog of strictly restricted toxic and hazardous chemicals. This catalog is updated annually, or not annually, but it will be updated. So this is in the 2020 edition. Okay, so in order to find to know whether the 3 kind of chemicals are in the plastic-made products, we sent 20 black, not all black, but some with some black parts of products in for brominated flame retardants, and 20 water bottles for BPA, and 10 ski gloves like this for PFAS. And the results blew our mind. 19 out of 20 black plastics contained all 8 octo BDEs and 1 deca BD, and the amount, the range of the amount ranges from 23 to 366,200 microgram per kilogram, and 95%, i.e. 90 out of 20 bottles contained PPA, and even there are 2 labeled BPA free contained BPA, and the amount ranges, the concentration ranges from 0 to 50,000 to 292 nanogram per liter, and 10 gloves contained this 822 FTOH, and the range is 23.4 to 129 nanogram per gram. Hence, we made these recommendations as a general. We haven't made recommendations like Olga and Theo did. So we mentioned as a whole. So we mentioned. So we recommended that the government should consider plastic recycling and reclamation at the early stage of product design, such as careful use of toxic and harmful additives, choosing a single material, reducing the use of non-recycled and hard-to-recycle materials, avoiding the use of dark pigments that cannot be sorted by machines, etc. Implement measures to ban additives such as perfluoro, PFAS, BRominated flame retardants, and short-chain chlorinated paraffins that are persistent organic pollutants, and endocrine disrupting chemicals such as bisphenols. Also establish a quality certification system for recycled products to improve the quality of recycled products and increase public acceptance. And thank you, everyone. Here is my contact information. You could contact me if you want to know more about the national reports and the test result. Thank you.
Thank you, Lingli, for your comprehensive and also very alarming presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you very much to our 3 country experts. Reminder to also, again, all the country reports and technical reports are available in the IPEN website. We will type in the link again. So now I would like to again call on Yitka to wrap up the technical and country reports and provide final recommendations. Yitka?
Now?
Yes.
Wow, excellent. Sorry for those troubles. Yeah.
No worries.
So allow me some final comments, reviews on the findings of our technical and analytical studies on BPA, brominated flame retardants, and PFAS in consumer products. I will start with BPA and giving example of the European Union, or basically Western world, and the lessons which we can learn from, unfortunately, very ineffective action on BPA. The fact is that the first findings and first evidence about the harms of BPA revealed already in 30s of 20th century. So it's back many decades. Unfortunately, it took us a long time to come with first restriction of BPA in children products, in mounting toys. And the effects of this restriction, which we see nowadays, is that there are still polycarbonate materials in use, not using BPA, but other bisphenol alternatives, BPS and BPF. It's not only a problem of polycarbonates, but other plastic materials. We need to learn from these lessons and ineffective actions taken in Europe. And there is definitely urgent need to switch this phase of regrettable substitutes of BPA and come directly with having all bisphenols as a group restricted and banned in the products which are used by children or in contact with food. So definitely our aim in this group of chemicals should be the class-based approach. For the other groups of chemicals, we unfortunately can repeat almost the same, because PFAS are also large group of chemicals being omnipresent in the environment, in our waters, in our bodies. We are bringing evidence on the presence of PFAS in different consumer products, outdoor wear, food wrapping, compostable, disposable food packaging and tableware. And we also continue to show that the utilization of PFAS in consumer products leads to contamination of our environment. It's why we are also taking water and sediment samples in the vicinity of PFAS pollution hotspots. With all of those efforts, we call for the action for class-based restriction for PFAS in all non-essential uses of PFAS. And when we look at the last but not least group of chemicals, we again don't work only in the field of consumer products. We look into the recycling path and what's happening at the places where e-waste plastics are being exported and dismantled. And we are bringing evidence that those very unfortunate practices happening in the developing countries lead to contamination of human food and, for example, chicken eggs. This action has its implication into certain legal provisions. So our main action on brominated flame retardants relates to setting strict limits for brominated flame retardant contents in waste. Because only when we have very strict limits for contents of BFRs in waste, the recycling practice will be stopped and will not be continued. E-waste plastics containing brominated flame retardants will not be exported into developing countries, into countries there are no capacities or very limited capacities for good management of plastic materials containing such dangerous chemicals. And when I wrap up the entire efforts and intentions of IPEN in those fields, we definitely make as much as possible to argue for class-based approach, stopping the approaches where one harmful chemicals is being replaced by another recreditable substitute. We call for global incentiveness. We work mainly globally at the field of Stockholm, Basel Convention, or SICOM, and we also call for control over the entire life cycle. Because once when chemicals are being banned in the products, we always need to control and watch on also waste which are containing stockpiles of the chemicals, of the restricted or banned chemicals, and those waste can continue releasing chemicals into the environment. And definitely there are several systematic solutions for plastic treaties, for plastic creases, and one of them is plastic treaty. And with this, I can definitely give the floor to Vito.
Thank you once again, Yitka. We have one more presentation coming up, particularly as it relates to, as our topic relates to the plastic treaty, that the resolution on the plastic treaty. But before that, let's cover, many of the questions have already been answered by our speakers, but I'd also like to call on other guests here who were also part of the BPA study, and they've released the results in country, and you would like to, if you could share with us the output or the outcomes when you released the developments in your country, when you released the reports, the results of the BPA report in your country. May I call on Mageswari Sangaraningam, a researcher at Consumers Association of Penang in Malaysia. Do share with us, Mages, any developments since you released the results in your country.
Yeah, greetings everyone from Malaysia. So in Malaysia, the advocacy of the Consumers Association of Penang, where I work with, so decades ago, we succeeded in the implementation of a ban of feeding bottles containing BPA. So the ban was enforced since 1st of March 2012. So we thank IPEN for giving us the opportunity to send out samples of feeding bottles and also other polycarbonate bottles for testing. So the results showed that having regulations alone is not adequate. It has to be enforced. In Malaysia, Section 27A of our food regulations, it states that no person shall import, manufacture, or advertise for sale or sell any feeding bottles containing BPA. So it further states that the words BPA free may be labeled on the feeding bottles, but it should not contain BPA. So the analysis found that one made in China baby feeding bottle to contain BPA. So this bottle also had a BPA free label. Hence, the product not only violated Malaysia's food regulations, but also our Trade Description Act. On February 18, CAP issued a press statement to share the findings. We received really good media coverage, both online, print, and broadcast media. And one media outlet had also contacted us for a follow-up feature article on this subject. And following the media reports, before we could contact the Ministry of Health, the one division of the Ministry of Health already contacted CAP for more information, and we have already supplied the information. So lessons learned from this, the analysis shows that bans should be followed up with monitoring and stringent enforcement, especially on the issue of mislabeling, because parents are being tricked into buying products that are toxic and also can harm their children. So that is our sharing from Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you, Magus. And we certainly hope that there will be more developments, in terms of policy action from your government. Thank you. Is Chalani here? Can I maybe also hear from Chalani? Chalani Rubesing is from the Center for Environmental Justice in Sri Lanka. They were also part of the BPA study. Would you like to share on some national action after you release the study, Chalani?
Yes, Leah, thank you very much. Greetings to all of you joining from around the world. First, I would like to thank IPEN for making Center for Environmental Justice Sri Lanka a part of this study. And I think after the lead paint study, this study on BPA in plastic feeding bottles and cups is the one that made a big influence on regulatory bodies responsible for quality of the consumer products. Especially in Sri Lanka, we don't have a particular regulation up to now, but we are following up to have this policy by the end of this year at least. We are really trying hard with these results and also the results around the world that came out after this study. So as soon as we release the press release on the BPA study, including the country-specific data for Sri Lanka, the news grabbed the media attention and it was published on a number of newspapers, and then those papers were read out on electronic media, and it was a huge conversation later on. So one of the channels made a comprehensive documentary on the study to their main news slot, and they even followed up with the Ministry of Environment, and he actually agreed to look into the matter. Later on, they played this recording video on a discussion with the State Minister of Cooperative Services, Marketing Development and Consumer Protection, and he too agreed to look upon to this matter and take some action. And I was also contacted by a company who import that product that we found as BPA free, yet found some BPA in the product in our research. So they also shared with me one of their test reports that indicated BPA was not detected in the level 0.03 micrograms per milliliter. However, the product was different. So they agreed to look into this matter, and if necessary, they would even omit or give up the product from importing and selling in this country. So that was a very good commitment we received from a company, because they have a good, large market share in the country as well. I was also contacted by this Sri Lanka Standard Institution. In Sri Lanka, usually the standard becomes the regulation. So I shared this study results and also shared the contaminants report, toxics in recycled plastic report. So what we asked for them was a regulation that covers all these toxic contaminants. However, one officer contacted me to say that such a standard reform does not need to go through them, but rather the Consumer Affairs Authority, who have the legal rights, can also act on them. So what we plan is in the future, we will follow up with both these institutions, and very soon we are planning to have a stakeholder discussion with these institutions. And we also have in our hands another study with the BPA in thermal papers and also phthalates in erasers. So with all these results, we are planning to have a discussion with them to move towards a policy decision or a set regulation for the standards. So thank you very much, and we will keep you updated.
Thank you, Chalani, and good job on the media outreach, the public outreach. And yeah, do keep us posted on the developments. Thank you. Okay, so maybe we can cover one question, but I was thinking maybe that could also be, Vito can also be, the last presenter can cover that question. We have one live question in the Q&A from CHF Zambia. Michael, is it possible to ban plastic manufacturing at the source of production in order to protect the public in developing countries, as there's lack of enforcement and the community awareness is also usually lacking? So I will challenge Vito. So let me segue now to our last presenter, who we would request can also start with answering that question. So our last presenter is Vito Bonsante. Vito will put the recent reports in the context of the upcoming Global Plastic Treaty. Vito is IPEN's policy and technical advisor. He is an environmental health lawyer with over 15 years of international experience from the EU and Canada, and also international experience from Eastern Europe and Africa in drafting, analyzing, and implementing environmental legislation. The floor is yours, Vito.
Thank you very much, Leah. I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you see the full version.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Oh, let me redo this. It will come in a second.
There, it's okay now.
All right. Okay. So yeah, I think I'm going to touch upon that question in a minute. So what I'm going to talk about is like very briefly what is the outcome of the United Nations Environmental Assembly that happened just about a month ago, and where a resolution to start a negotiation on plastic pollution, on a treaty on plastic pollution, will happen, and to which extent though that treaty may address some of the recommendations that we've heard colleagues bringing up during this presentation, and to address the problem of chemical contamination and the toxic impacts of plastics throughout the life cycle. So first of all, the big news is the fact that the world agreed to negotiate a historic treaty on plastic pollution, and IPEN was present at the negotiations with its team, but also with a fairly broad team of a much broader team of NGOs. I think there were around 300 representatives of NGOs in Nairobi around the negotiations. Obviously, these numbers are not similar to the climate change negotiations, but the interest, it was obviously very, very broad in this resolution, and also IPEN was featured as well as on some of the publications following this this sort of historic initial agreement, and specifically highlighting the health and chemicals aspects of it. So what I'm going to do in the next 4 slides is to highlight 4 ways in which the resolution and the upcoming treaty may relate to chemicals and to health, and to solve the issues of the impacts of toxics throughout the life cycle. So first of all is the fact how plastic pollution is defined. And you know, from these photos, many see plastic pollution as mainly a litter issue. That's how the talks and the interest in plastic pollution had started, and mainly confined to marine pollution. However, the resolution, the decision by these governments was also to address not only marine plastic pollution, but plastic pollution in general. And that obviously means that the microplastic aspects, the chemical aspects of plastics could or will have to be considered in the negotiation. So we will both try to address the visible impacts of plastics, the litter, the entanglement of sea life, but also the invisible part, and that's what we are focusing on in this webinar and in the studies that IPEN has produced. The second thing that will be relevant for plastics, and obviously my colleagues have already made some reference to this, is the fact that the resolution recognizes that plastic pollution needs to be tackled through a full life cycle approach. So this means that the use and the release of harmful substances will be addressed at all phases of the life cycle of plastics. So as a minimum, the toxic impacts of plastics during production, design, consumption, waste management will have to be addressed during the treaty negotiations. Now, going back to the questions about plastic production, will it be possible? Will this treaty allow capping plastic production, reducing the amount of plastic that is being produced? That will be subject to the negotiation, and as well as understanding where does the life cycle of plastic start. Does it start already at extraction? Does it start at the production of the chemicals? Or does it start at the phase in which these chemicals become plastics? But surely there is an opportunity with this treaty to go into the direction of curbing or limiting the production of plastics. So it's a good starting point, both holistically to address all the impacts of plastics on all ecosystems, and including human health. The third way in which this resolution relates to chemicals is the fact that that the treaty that will be in negotiation has the objective to promote sustainable production and consumption of plastics, and including product design, and including using resource efficiency and circular economy approaches. So in our reports, we are sort of highlighting how right now the way plastics are produced are poisoning the circular economy because there is too much plastic. Some polymers are of concern, and the amount of hazardous chemicals that are uncontrolled make it very difficult to have a clean and safe circular economy. Therefore, if the treaty will deal with the circular economy and sustainable production and consumption, inevitably the issue of chemicals will be tackled. Already now, established principles on circular economy do foresee that toxic chemicals should be kept out of circular economy, and there are initial, let's say, studies or proposals when considering sustainability principles for plastics that toxic chemicals should be excluded, or at least their presence should be should be transparent and should be communicated in the supply chain. Finally, I think it's important the fact that the resolution does consider the health aspect of, specifically considers the fact that the treaty should address the risks from the health risk from the use and consumption of plastics, as well as the impact on human well-being. It also recognizes the fact that the treaty will have to work in conjunction with existing treaties. Some of the treaties that have already been mentioned in this webinar include the Stockholm Convention that is already addressing some of these additives that are used in plastics, and more are being added for global elimination, but also the Basel Convention when it comes to the dumping and the global waste transport, and potentially even SICAM, which also is, although it's not a legally binding instrument, it includes initiatives to tackle several of these pollutants to plastics, as well as transparency of chemicals in products. And so this will provide a space for accelerating the implementation of these other resolutions. So finally, I just wanted to close up with this slide, where we can see very clearly that the production of plastics, which we know very well, is meant to increase dramatically in the next 20 years, 20 to 30 years, also goes hand in hand with the projected increase in consumption and in production of chemicals, including toxic chemicals. And therefore, the treaty negotiation is also an opportunity to continue to highlight the challenges of using chemicals and hazardous chemicals in plastics, and to highlight the emerging science around toxics and plastics. A very recent study has claims that there are some planetary boundaries that plastics and chemicals have already crossed, and therefore it calls for a reduction in the amount of plastics that is used and the amount of toxic chemicals that are used and are emitted into the environment. So thank you very much, and that's all for me. Back to Julia.
Thank you so much, Vito, for providing us with the most important points of the resolution that was passed by UNEA 5 on a global plastic treaty. And certainly we should all be part of making sure that such treaty will really answer or resolve our many problems on plastic. We'll be happy to take a few questions now for Vito and for the other speakers. But actually, we just most of the questions have been answered already. Thank you to our speakers. May I invite our panelists to turn on your videos? Okay, let's start with one question. And comment from Hemsing. He agrees with Mages that many products, and actually the results in the other studies also, many products are labeled BPA or PFO or PFAS free. But how can poor countries test the veracity of such claims? Anyone want to take that on?
I mean, I'm happy to start, but I hopefully would like to hear my colleagues in the from the countries. But I mean, I think the approach that we try to promote is that the best way is that, you know, labeling and transparency is a way to ensure that the best management or how to manage the end of life of these products, or to protect ourselves and increase consumer awareness, but are the best way to prevent both these problems with enforcement is to ban these products at sources and introduce alternative non-toxic solutions.
Thank you, Vito. Anyone else want to add quickly on that?
I can add very quickly. I fully agree that global international approach in banning those chemicals would be the best way to go. And I think we can also help internationally checking manufacturers who sell their products in several countries and check if they don't use double standard thing, what we are often right facing to same company selling chemical free or toxics free products in the country where the legislation is at place, and having heavily contaminated products in the other countries. Yeah, so having also the focus on those large sources could be a strategic approach.
Thank you, Yitka, for the additional points. There's one more question and also related to a phoned-in question. So how do we approach recycling of plastic in the meantime before these chemicals are banned? No? And related to that, how can we environmentally manage electronic waste with bromine so that it will not end as feedstocks to cement kilns?
Yeah, sure, I can go ahead. Yeah, so with bromine, we can easygoing methods to separate bromine-rich plastic materials. One of them is using X-ray beams. Other methods widely used also in India is that the plastic material is being shredded and put into the water bath, and then there is observation on the differentiated density of the BFR containing and BFR free material, and based on this comparison we can separate BFR containing plastics, and then definitely non-combustion technologies, not using any incineration processes should take place, because those technologies do not produce any additional persistent organic pollutants. Yeah, otherwise when products with brominated flame retardants are being incinerated, brominated dioxins and other halogenated chemicals can be released into the environment. Yeah, so meantime, non-combustion technologies. Yeah.
Thank you, Yitka. Any other additional points you want to raise, any of the panelists, on that question? No more. Okay, well, we have no other open questions. Yay. Oops, there's one. Okay. Maybe this can be our last two. Dear speakers, is it okay? The textile industry is the largest contributor of microplastic. They can easily circumvent such a treaty because of nebulous definitions and excluding certain sectors, such as the textile industries, will not be regulated under such a mechanism. What can be done to address this issue?
I mean, I can start taking that. From the point of view of the microplastics, I'm not maybe the right person to answer that. But I think in terms of I think the intention right now is to have a broader possible definition of plastic, what plastics are. So we need to start to have a conversation of what we intend by plastics, and definitely including, you know, textiles in the also in the definition of plastics. Therefore, we will be able, through various measures, which could include limiting production, can include standards for decreasing the amount of shredding, or you know, like you know, upstream and downstream measures to prevent the pollution from textiles to be included in the treaty. Obviously, the treaty alone won't be able to address like the overconsumption and the overproduction of textiles alone, but having a comprehensive approach is like a starting point to limit the amount of the impact that it has on human health and on the environment.
Thank you, Vito. Any other points? Okay, if not, sorry, folks, but that's all the time we have for today. We would like to thank our speakers for sharing your expertise and time with us, and for patiently answering all the questions posed in today's program. To formally close the program, I would like to call on Griffins Ocheng. He is the co-chair of IPEN's Toxic Plastic Working Group, to give the closing remarks. Griffins?
Hello all. Thank you much, Leah. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you are. Thank you very much to the presenters. That was informative. I think I just joined when Hitka was presenting, but I believe that you had a very good session. And one thing I just wanted to emphasize, or rather to share in closing, is that sometimes July last year, IPEN developed a strategy on the issue of plastics, and particularly the toxic chemicals in plastics. And the goal of this strategy is to really eliminate the harm caused by toxic chemicals in plastic throughout its life cycle. And to achieve this goal, IPEN set up as one of the activities to provide evidence through, you know, generating scientific and data and information on how toxics in plastic harm human health, the environment. So this is one of the webinars that you know, is aimed at achieving this, also through awareness creation. So I really want to thank you all and thank IPEN for you know, a collective team effort to be able to bring this information in a simpler way that and through projects that IPEN is undertaking. So the strategy is posted in the IPEN website, I believe, and you will get more information. So and we will continue to organize this such kind of webinars, information sharing, even as we gather more data from the researchers and the projects that are ongoing throughout by IPEN throughout different regions. So I really want to thank all the speakers for taking their time. And as we continue to go into the negotiations, I think such more information will help shape the treaty towards protecting and eliminating the hazardous substances in the plastics throughout the life cycle. So mine is basically to wish you all the best, and thank all the speakers as well as the audience for questions and taking their time to participate in this webinar. Greetings all from Bali, which is also, we are staying late for some late night negotiations. So we are all doing every effort we need to do to protect the global citizens from harms from caused by chemicals. So kudos to you all for all the good work that you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Griffins, for making time with us. As Griffin said, he's joining us from Bali, the ongoing Minamata Convention. So thank you. So thank you all again, dear speakers. Please, before we go, I invite again and say goodbye to our attendees. Can we all turn on our cameras again, all the panelists, including Griffins and Chelani and everyone, for a quick photo op? Okay, who will take charge of that? Just alert us if it's done.
Hello, everyone. I will take the photo.
Okay.
So may I request everyone to please turn on their cameras? Okay. 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much again, our dear speakers and everyone for joining us. Please don't forget to complete the post-webinar survey that will flash in your screen after the program. So thank you, goodbye, and take care, everyone.
Thank you, Leah.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye, take care.